Life is a collection of moments, some mundane, others extraordinary, that hold the power to change everything. Imagine something as ordinary as requesting a simple sandwich, leading to a cascade of revelations and transformations. That's the story we're sharing today, a tale of compassion, courage, and connection that reminds us how deeply intertwined our lives can become. Stay tuned as we unravel a narrative of resilience, empathy, and the surprising secrets hidden in the everyday. If you feel moved by this story, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Here's a prompt for you. I embrace the beauty of kindness and its ability to transform lives. Let's spread positivity and keep the conversation going. Now let's begin where it all started, with a simple plea. The diner's bell jingled as Edgar shuffled through the door, his worn shoes tapping softly against the linoleum floor. It was mid-afternoon, the lull between the lunch and dinner rushes, and the smell of coffee and fried eggs hung thick in the air. Portland's gray skies peeked through the diner's large windows, casting a muted light over the scene. Edgar hesitated for a moment, clutching a crumpled bill in one hand and a battered fedora in the other. He scanned the room with an air of quiet dignity, his weathered face betraying both weariness and a glimmer of hope. He approached the counter cautiously. Behind it stood Charlotte, the diner's owner, a woman known for her efficiency, but also for her brusque manner. Her sharp eyes darted to Edgar as he cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I'd like a sandwich, please. Ham and cheese if you have it. I don't have enough for the full price, but I can pay most of it." He held out the crumpled bill, his hand trembling slightly. Charlotte glanced at the money, then at Edgar. A flicker of disdain crossed her face. "This isn't a charity," she snapped, loud enough for nearby patrons to hear. "If you can't pay, you can't eat. Simple as that." A hush fell over the room. The few customers present turned their attention to the exchange, their eyes filled with varying degrees of discomfort and pity. Edgar's cheeks flushed, but he stood his ground. "I understand," he replied quietly, folding the bill back into his pocket. "Thank you for your time." Before he could turn to leave, a voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me," it said, firm and clear. The speaker was a woman seated at a corner table, her presence commanding without being overbearing. Sophia, a polished businesswoman with an air of quiet authority, placed her coffee cup on its saucer and rose to her feet. "What's the price of a ham and cheese sandwich?" she asked Charlotte, her tone calm but insistent. Charlotte hesitated, caught off guard. $6, she replied, almost begrudgingly. Sophia reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a crisp $20 bill, and placed it on the counter. "Here's 20. That covers his sandwich, my coffee, and a tip for your trouble." She turned to Edgar, offering a warm smile. "Sir, please sit and enjoy your meal. No one should go hungry over a few dollars." The room seemed to exhale as Edgar nodded, his gratitude evident in his glistening eyes. "Thank you, ma'am," he murmured, taking a seat at a booth. Charlotte, however, was less moved. She pocketed the money with a curt nod, muttering something under her breath about people playing the victim. Sophia's eyes narrowed, her usually composed demeanor showing a hint of irritation. "Ma'am," she addressed Charlotte, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "I suggest you reconsider how you treat those who walk through your doors. Kindness costs nothing, but the lack of it can leave scars deeper than you might imagine." Charlotte said nothing, but the flush in her cheeks betrayed a mix of embarrassment and resentment. Sophia returned to her table, but her attention lingered on Edgar. There was something about him, his quiet dignity, the way he clutched his hat as though it were a lifeline, that stirred memories she couldn't quite place. As Edgar ate, savoring each bite of the sandwich, Sophia observed him closely. She noticed his wristwatch, a vintage piece with a leather strap worn thin from years of use. It was old-fashioned, the kind her father used to wear. But it wasn't just the style of the watch that caught her attention. It was the faint engraving on the back, visible when Edgar shifted his wrist. She squinted, trying to make out the initials. They were familiar, painfully so. Sophia felt a strange pull, as though the universe was nudging her toward this man for reasons she couldn't yet understand. She sipped her coffee, lost in thought, her mind flickering between the present and the past she had long tried to forget. As Edgar finished his meal and prepared to leave, he approached Sophia's table, hat in hand. "Thank you again, ma'am," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I won't forget your kindness," Sophia smiled, but her curiosity got the better of her. "That's a fine watch you're wearing," she remarked casually. "May I ask where you got it?" Edgar hesitated, his expression guarded. "It was a gift," he said simply, "from someone very dear to me a long time ago." Sophia nodded, sensing that pressing further would be intrusive, but the encounter left her unsettled, her mind buzzing with unanswered questions. Who was this man? And why did that watch feel like a bridge to a chapter of her life she thought was closed? What is the story behind Edgar's watch? And what connection does it have to Sophia's past? Stay with us as we uncover a web of memories, regrets, and revelations that will leave you questioning the power of fate. Sophia watched as Edgar shuffled out of the diner, his shoulders slightly hunched, though his step seemed a bit lighter after the meal. The sight left an impression she couldn't shake. There was something hauntingly familiar about the man, his mannerisms, the gentle way he spoke, and most of all, that watch. For years, Sophia had built her life on meticulous control. As the CEO of a thriving marketing firm, she was no stranger to solving puzzles and connecting the dots. And yet, the riddle Edgar posed unsettled her in ways that no corporate crisis ever had. She finished her coffee, her gaze lingering on the door through which Edgar had exited. The diner's air felt heavier than usual. The awkward tension between Sophia and Charlotte hadn't entirely dissipated, and the other patrons avoided eye contact. Sophia leaned back in her chair, replaying the interaction in her mind. A small voice inside her wouldn't let go of what she had seen. Edgar's humility, Charlotte's coldness, and her own visceral reaction to it all. "You know," Sophia said aloud, directing her words at Charlotte but loud enough for the room to hear, "it doesn't take much to show a little compassion. Maybe next time, instead of focusing on what someone can't afford, focus on what they might need." Charlotte scoffed but said nothing. Her hands busied themselves wiping an already clean counter, though the pink flush in her cheeks revealed her discomfort. Sophia, feeling the weight of the moment, decided to leave. As she gathered her things, the young waitress who had been silently observing the entire scene hesitated before stepping closer. "Thank you," she said softly, "for what you did for him. Most people just look away." Sophia smiled faintly and nodded. "Kindness has a ripple effect," she replied. "Let's hope today's ripples go far." Outside, the brisk Portland air hit her like a cold splash of water. She pulled her coat tighter around her and glanced down the street. Edgar was nowhere to be seen, but her mind was still tethered to him. Her driver was already waiting by the curb, but instead of heading directly to her next meeting, she gave a new destination. "Follow the man who just left," she instructed. "The one in the gray coat and fedora." The driver raised an eyebrow but complied. Within minutes, they spotted Edgar walking down a quiet, tree-lined street, his hands tucked into his pockets. He stopped in front of a small park bench and sat down, staring at a patch of wilting flowers by the sidewalk. Sophia instructed the driver to stop a short distance away. For several minutes, she sat in the car, watching him. There was a vulnerability in his stillness, a kind of quiet surrender that tugged at her heart. Finally, she stepped out and approached him. "Excuse me, Edgar," she said gently. He looked up, startled. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by a flash of embarrassment. "Oh, it's you," he murmured. "The kind lady from the diner." Sophia smiled. "May I sit?" He nodded, motioning to the empty space beside him. For a moment, they sat in silence, the sounds of the city fading into the background. Sophia took a deep breath, unsure of how to frame her curiosity without seeming intrusive. "That watch," she began, choosing her words carefully. "It caught my eye. My father had one just like it. I couldn't help but wonder." Edgar glanced down at his wrist. The watch's leather strap was cracked, and the metal casing bore the marks of time, but it still ticked steadily. "It's old," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "A gift from someone who meant the world to me. I've kept it all these years." Sophia's chest tightened. The initials on the back, Akeke, those were my father's. Henry Caldwell. Did you know him? Edgar's expression froze, his face a mixture of shock and recognition. He turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. Henry Caldwell, your father? Sophia nodded, her heart pounding. Yes, he passed away years ago, but this watch, it's unmistakably his. Please, Edgar, if you know something, tell me. Edgar exhaled deeply, his hand trembling as he removed the watch and held it out to her. I didn't know him well, he said slowly, but he changed my life. Sophia leaned closer, her pulse racing. How? Edgar's gaze grew distant, his voice tinged with nostalgia. It was years ago, back when I was a younger man, trying to make something of myself. I was struggling working odd jobs, barely scraping by. One day, I found myself in a situation not too different from what you saw today. I was hungry, broke, and feeling like the world had forgotten me. Your father was the one who reached out. Sophia listened intently, her breath catching with every word. He didn't know me, Edgar continued, but he saw me. He offered me a job, a meal, and most importantly, hope. This watch was his way of reminding me that time is precious, that every second we have is an opportunity to do something good. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. She had always known her father as a generous man, but hearing this story from Edgar added a layer of depth she hadn't fully understood. And you kept it all these years? She asked. Edgar nodded. It's a symbol, not just of him, but of the kindness he showed me. It's what kept me going, even when things got tough. Sophia swallowed hard, the gravity of Edgar's words settling over her. And now, she said softly, you're the one in need. He smiled faintly. Life has its cycles, doesn't it? Sophia has just discovered a powerful link between Edgar and her late father, but this is only the beginning. What deeper truths about Edgar's life and her own will come to light? And how will these revelations change the course of their paths forever? Stay with us to uncover the next chapter of this heartfelt journey. Eleanor's hand was cool and frail in Sophia's, but her grip carried an unexpected strength, as if the years of hardship had forged an unbreakable will within her. The shelter's modest surroundings faded into the background as the three sat together, bound by a story that was only beginning to unfold. Edgar sat close to his wife, his arm protectively draped around her shoulders. We've been through a lot, he began softly, his voice tinged with both sorrow and gratitude. But we've always had each other. That's what kept us going, even when everything else fell apart. Sophia, seated across from them on a folding chair, felt a lump forming in her throat. Here was a love so steadfast, so enduring, that it defied the harshest circumstances. But the question still nagged at her. How did her father fit into their lives? And why did this encounter feel so significant? Edgar, she said gently, you said my father helped you when you were struggling. But I have to ask, was there more to it? You seemed surprised when I mentioned his name. Edgar exchanged a glance with Eleanor, his expression unreadable. The pause stretched long enough for Sophia to wonder if she had overstepped. Finally, Edgar nodded, his face solemn. There is more, he admitted, but it's not an easy story to tell. Sophia leaned in, her heart pounding. Please, she urged. I need to know. Edgar took a deep breath, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his worn coat. It was nearly 30 years ago, he began, his voice steady but laden with emotion. Eleanor and I were newlyweds, full of hope and plans for the future. I was working at a factory, and she was sewing dresses for a local boutique. We didn't have much, but we were happy. Eleanor nodded, her eyes distant, as if she could see the past unfolding before her. We were saving for a little house, she said softly, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. It wasn't going to be much, but it was going to be ours. Edgar continued, his tone growing heavier. Then came the accident. A faulty machine at the factory crushed my hand. I couldn't work, and the medical bills started piling up. We were drowning in debt, and the life we had dreamed of seemed to slip further away with every passing day. Sophia listened intently, her mind painting vivid pictures of the struggles they described. How did my father come into the picture? She asked. It was at the courthouse, Edgar said. We were there to fight off yet another eviction notice. Your father was there on unrelated business, but he overheard us talking to our lawyer, if you could call him that. He was more interested in billing us than helping us." Eleanor picked up the thread of the story, her voice growing stronger. "Henry stepped in. He didn't know us, but he offered to cover our legal fees and even gave us enough money to find a place to stay. He didn't ask for anything in return, he just said it was the right thing to do." Sophia felt tears welling up as she imagined her father extending a hand to this couple in need. "That sounds like him," she murmured. "He always believed in helping people, no matter the cost." Edgar's expression grew more serious. "There's another part to this story," he said. "Something we've never told anyone." Sophia's breath caught. "What is it?" Eleanor looked at Edgar, her eyes brimming with unspoken emotion. "It's about the watch," he said, "and what it represents." Edgar nodded. "Your father didn't just give me that watch. He entrusted me with something far more precious. You see, Henry wasn't just helping us out of kindness. He saw something in us, something that reminded him of himself and your mother." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. "My mother?" she asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and disbelief. "How do you know about her?" Edgar hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket. From within, he pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "He gave me this," he said, handing it to Sophia. "He said it was for when the time was right." Sophia unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was a handwritten note, the ink faded but legible. "To whoever holds this, know that it is never too late to make amends, to heal wounds, or to find redemption. Love is the only thing that lasts. Protect it, nurture it, and pass it on." Henry Caldwell. Sophia stared at the words, her vision blurring with tears. The message was so like her father, simple, profound, and deeply resonant. "Why did he give this to you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because he saw himself in us," Eleanor said. "He told us about his regrets, about how he had let work consume him, and how it had strained his relationship with your mother. He didn't want us to make the same mistakes." The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over them. Sophia felt a surge of conflicting emotions, pride in her father's wisdom, sorrow for his regrets, and a newfound sense of purpose. "You've carried this note all these years," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And now it's brought us together," Edgar nodded. "It's guided us through our darkest times. And now it feels like it's come full circle." Sophia reached out, taking both their hands in hers. "I don't believe in coincidences," she said firmly. "This was meant to happen. My father's legacy isn't just about what he did, it's about what we do with the lessons he left behind. And I intend to honor that." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I'm going to help you," Sophia said, her voice resolute. "Not just with a meal or a place to stay, but with a chance to rebuild your lives. You deserve that, and my father would have wanted it." Sophia has made a promise to help Edgar and Eleanor rebuild their lives. But how will this commitment reshape her own? As she uncovers more about her father's past and the ripple effects of his kindness, new challenges and unexpected truths lie ahead. Don't miss the next chapter in this extraordinary journey of compassion and redemption. The silence between them felt almost sacred, broken only by the faint hum of activity elsewhere in the shelter. Sophia's vow to help Edgar and Eleanor hung in the air like a beacon, a promise that felt both profound and necessary. But the path forward wasn't clear yet, and deep down, she knew that this was about more than just charity. It was about healing old wounds and forging new connections. Sophia straightened in her chair, her mind already racing with possibilities. "The first thing we'll do," she said, her voice steady with determination, "is get you both somewhere safe and comfortable. A shelter is a stopgap, not a solution." Eleanor's frail hand tightened around Edgar's. "We wouldn't want to impose," she said softly, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of hope. Sophia shook her head, her expression firm but kind. "This isn't an imposition. It's what my father would have wanted, and if I'm honest, what I want too. But first, there's something I need to know. Edgar, you said my father saw himself in you. Can you tell me more about that? About what he shared with you?" Edgar leaned back, his gaze distant as he sifted through memories. "Your father was a man who carried the weight of his choices. he said after a moment. He didn't speak much about himself, but when he did, his words carried a kind of gravity. Sophia nodded, her throat tightening. She had often suspected there were parts of her father's life he had kept from her, sacrifices he had made or burdens he had borne silently. "Did he ever talk about my mother?" she asked. Eleanor's voice broke through gently. "He did. He spoke of her often, though always with a sense of longing. He said she was the love of his life, but that his work had often kept them apart. He seemed to regret not spending more time with her, not showing her how much he truly cared." Sophia's chest ached. Her parents had been the bedrock of her childhood, but as she grew older, she had noticed the unspoken strain between them. Her father's absences, his late nights at the office, they had taken their toll, though her mother had always brushed it off with a smile and a reassuring word. "Do you think he was trying to make up for those regrets by helping you?" she asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and sadness. Edgar nodded. "I think so. He told me once that helping others was his way of finding redemption, of proving to himself that it wasn't too late to make things right." Sophia felt a surge of emotion she hadn't anticipated, a mixture of pride, grief, and a longing to understand her father more deeply. She reached into her bag, pulling out her phone. "Let's start by finding you a place to stay," she said, shifting gears. "I'll call a friend who runs a transitional housing program. It's not permanent, but it's a start." As she made the arrangements, Edgar and Eleanor exchanged a glance. "Sophia," Edgar said cautiously, "we're grateful for everything you're doing, but we don't want to be a burden. We've learned to live with very little." Sophia placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "You're not a burden," she said firmly. "You're part of a story that began long before today, and it's one I'm honored to continue. My father helped you because he believed in second chances. Let me do the same." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Sophia arranged for Edgar and Eleanor to move into a small but comfortable apartment provided by the housing program. She also ensured they had access to medical care, particularly for Eleanor, whose health had begun to decline noticeably. Sophia visited them regularly, bringing groceries, warm blankets, and perhaps most importantly, her time. She listened to their stories, learning more about their journey and the love that had sustained them through the darkest of times. In return, they shared memories of her father that painted a fuller picture of the man she had known but never fully understood. One afternoon, as they sat together in the cozy living room of the apartment, Sophia noticed a faded photograph on the mantel. It was a picture of Edgar and Eleanor on their wedding day, their smiles radiant and full of promise. But tucked into the edge of the frame was another photograph, one of Henry Caldwell, standing with Edgar in what appeared to be a courthouse. Sophia picked it up, her fingers brushing the worn edges. "Where did this come from?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Edgar leaned forward, his expression softening. "Your father insisted on taking that photo," he said. "He wanted us to remember that day, not as the day we almost lost everything, but as the day we were given a second chance." Sophia stared at the image, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and longing. "He never told me about this," she said quietly, "but I can see why it mattered so much to him." Over time, their connection deepened, and Sophia found herself reflecting on her own life. Her work had always been her priority, much like her father's had been, but seeing the impact he had made on Edgar and Eleanor's lives made her question whether she was truly living up to his legacy. One evening, as she sat with Edgar and Eleanor over a simple dinner, she voiced her thoughts. "I've spent so much of my life chasing success," she admitted. "But what does it really mean if I'm not making a difference?" Eleanor reached across the table, her hand covering Sophia's. "You already are," she said gently. "You've given us more than we ever could have hoped for. And in doing so, you've honored your father in the best way possible." Sophia smiled, her eyes misting. "Thank you," she said. "But I think there's still more I can do, not just for you, but for others like you, people who need a hand to hold, a voice to lift them up." Edgar nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Your father always believed that kindness was the most powerful tool we have. Maybe it's time to put that belief into action." Sophia's mind began to race with possibilities. She could create a foundation in her father's name, one dedicated to helping those in need. She could turn her resources and skills toward building a legacy of compassion and change. As Sophia begins to envision a future rooted in her father's values, she takes her first steps toward building something greater than herself. But new challenges and unexpected revelations lie ahead, as old wounds are revisited and new opportunities emerge. What will Sophia discover as she delves deeper into her family's legacy? And how will her journey shape the lives of those around her? Stay tuned as the story unfolds. Sophia's vision for a foundation grew clearer with each passing day, fueled by the time she spent with Edgar and Eleanor. Their resilience and gratitude were a constant reminder of the transformative power of compassion. Inspired by her father's legacy, she began laying the groundwork for what she tentatively called the Caldwell Foundation for Renewal. Its mission: to offer second chances to those who, like Edgar and Eleanor, had fallen through the cracks. Yet, as Sophia worked tirelessly to bring her vision to life, she couldn't ignore the lingering tension from the diner where she had first met Edgar. Charlotte, the diner owner, had left an impression, a bitter one, and Sophia wondered if the seeds of kindness could be planted even in the hardest of hearts. One morning, as Sophia finished drafting the foundation's mission statement, she glanced at her calendar. She had scheduled a follow-up visit with Edgar and Eleanor that afternoon, but an idea struck her. Before heading to their apartment, she decided to make an unannounced stop at Charlotte's diner. The bell above the door jingled as Sophia stepped inside, just as it had the day she met Edgar. The diner was bustling this time, filled with the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation. Charlotte stood behind the counter, her sharp eyes scanning the room with practiced efficiency. When she spotted Sophia, her expression stiffened. "Well, if it isn't Miss High and Mighty," Charlotte said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "What brings you back here?" Sophia smiled politely, ignoring the jab. "I'd like a coffee, please," she said, taking a seat at the counter. Charlotte poured the coffee without a word, placing the cup in front of Sophia with a thud. Sophia took a sip, savoring the warmth before setting the cup down. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice calm. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "Thank me? For what?" "For reminding me of something important," Sophia replied. "That even small moments, like the way we treat someone who's struggling, can have a ripple effect." Charlotte snorted. "Look, I don't have time for lectures. If you're here to talk about that old man, save it. I run a business, not a charity." Sophia's smile didn't waver. "I'm not here to lecture, but I am here to challenge you." Charlotte leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "Oh, this should be good." "What kind of challenge?" "Kindness," Sophia said simply. "Once a week, for 1 hour, offer free meals to anyone who needs them. No questions asked." Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "And why would I do that?" "Because kindness isn't just for the people receiving it. It's for you, too. It changes you, softens you, and reminds you of what really matters. And if you're worried about the cost, I'll cover it. Consider it an investment in humanity." The diner fell quiet as nearby patrons listened, intrigued by the exchange. Charlotte stared at Sophia, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed. "You're serious about this?" "Completely," Sophia said. "Try it for a month. If it doesn't make a difference, I won't bother you again." Charlotte hesitated, then nodded begrudgingly. "Fine, 1 hour a week, but don't expect me to become some kind of saint. That's all I ask," Sophia said, finishing her coffee and leaving a generous tip. "Thank you for considering it." Over the next few weeks, Sophia's visits to Edgar and Eleanor became a mix of practical support and heartfelt conversations. With the foundation's launch approaching, she involved them in the planning, asking for their input on how to reach others in need. "We've been on the receiving end of kindness," Eleanor said one afternoon. "But if there's one thing we've learned, it's that people want to feel seen and valued. They don't just need help, they need hope." Edgar nodded in agreement. "And dignity. No one wants to feel like a burden or a charity case. Sometimes a kind word or a listening ear can mean as much as a meal." Sophia took their advice to heart, incorporating it into the foundation's programs. From mentorship initiatives to workshops on financial literacy and mental health, the foundation aimed to empower rather than merely provide. Meanwhile, Charlotte's weekly free meal hour at the diner began to draw attention. At first, she approached it with the same brusque attitude that had alienated so many. But as the weeks went by, something began to shift. The people who came through her doors weren't just strangers in need. They were neighbors, veterans, single parents, and elderly individuals who had fallen on hard times. One rainy Thursday, Charlotte found herself sitting across from a young mother and her 2 children who had come for a free meal. The mother thanked Charlotte with tears in her eyes, explaining how the gesture had lifted her spirits during a particularly difficult week. For the first time in years, Charlotte felt something crack open inside her, a sense of connection she hadn't realized she'd lost. The ripple effects of Sophia's challenge were evident when she visited the diner a month later. Charlotte greeted her with a cautious smile. The edge in her demeanor noticeably softened. "I'll admit," Charlotte said, pouring Sophia a fresh cup of coffee, "you were right. It's been good for me, this whole kindness thing. I still don't love freeloaders, but I've met some people who've changed my mind about a lot." Sophia smiled warmly. "That's the beauty of it. Kindness doesn't just change others, changes us." Charlotte chuckled. "You should put that on a bumper sticker." By the time the Caldwell Foundation for Renewal officially launched, it had already begun to weave a web of connection and transformation throughout the community. Edgar and Eleanor stood proudly by Sophia's side at the opening ceremony, their story serving as a testament to the foundation's mission. Sophia, addressing the crowd, spoke with conviction. "This foundation isn't just about providing resource, it's about creating opportunities for redemption, connection, and hope. My father believed that kindness could change the world, one act at a time. Today, we carry that belief forward." The applause was thunderous, but it was the quiet gratitude in Edgar and Eleanor's eyes that meant the most to her. As Sophia's foundation begins to flourish, new challenges and opportunities arise, testing her resolve and deepening her understanding of her father's legacy. What hidden truths will come to light as she continues this journey? And how will her growing network of kindness impact the community and herself in ways she never imagined? Stay with us as this story of compassion, transformation, and renewal continues to unfold. The launch of the Caldwell Foundation for Renewal was just the beginning. In the weeks following the ceremony, Sophia poured her heart and resources into making the foundation a living testament to her father's legacy. With Edgar and Eleanor serving as both advisors and living proof of the foundation's mission, its programs quickly gained traction, drawing attention from media outlets, local leaders, and even neighboring cities. But Sophia soon discovered that compassion, while powerful, was not always met with enthusiasm. Not everyone welcomed the changes the foundation aimed to bring. One rainy afternoon, Sophia sat in the foundation's modest office reviewing grant applications. Her assistant Marla poked her head in, a concerned look on her face. "Sophia," Marla said, "there's a man here asking to speak with you. He says it's urgent." Sophia frowned. "Who is he?" Marla hesitated. "He didn't give his name, but he mentioned the diner. I think he's one of the regulars there." Curious, Sophia set aside her work and stepped into the lobby. A wiry man in his late 40s stood there, his clothes worn but clean. He looked nervous, twisting a faded baseball cap in his hands. "Hello," Sophia said warmly. "I'm Sophia Caldwell. How can I help you?" The man cleared his throat, his voice low and hesitant. "My name's Frank. I heard about what you've been doing for Edgar and Eleanor, for the folks at the diner. I wasn't sure I should come, but Charlotte said you might listen." Sophia gestured for him to sit, her curiosity piqued. "Of course I'll listen, Frank. What's on your mind?" He sat, his shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. "I've been struggling for a long time," he admitted. "Lost my job years ago, and I've been picking up odd work here and there, but it's not enough. I want to turn things around, but it feels like the world's stacked against me." Sophia listened intently, her heart aching at the vulnerability in his voice. "You've taken the first step just by being here," she said gently. "What do you need, Frank? How can we help?" He hesitated, then pulled a tattered notebook from his pocket. "I used to draw," he said, flipping through pages filled with sketches. "Used to dream of being an artist, but dreams don't pay bills." Sophia studied the sketches, her eyes widening at the talent they revealed. "Frank, these are incredible," she said. "Have you ever thought about sharing your work, selling it?" Frank shook his head, his expression bleak. "Who'd buy anything from me?" Sophia smiled. "Let's find out." That evening, Sophia called an emergency meeting with Edgar and Eleanor, sitting around the small table in their apartment. She laid out Frank's story and her idea to help him. "He has talent," she said, holding up one of his sketches, "and a story worth telling. If we can showcase his work, we might be able to help him rebuild his life and inspire others to believe in second chances." Eleanor nodded, her eyes shining with approval. "Art has a way of reaching people," she said. "It shows them the beauty in the broken." Edgar smiled. "I like it," he said. "But how do we make it happen?" Sophia grinned. "I have a few ideas." The Foundation's first art exhibition, titled "The Hands That Create," opened 3 weeks later in a community center donated for the event. Frank's sketches were framed and displayed alongside artwork from other struggling artists Sophia had connected with through the foundation. The event drew a crowd of curious onlookers, local art enthusiasts, and reporters eager to cover the unique initiative. Frank stood in the corner, fidgeting nervously as people admired his work. Sophia approached him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "They're here because of you," she said, "because your art speaks to something universal." Frank looked at her, his eyes brimming with emotion. "I never thought I'd see the day when someone cared about what I had to say." "Believe it," Sophia replied, smiling. "This is just the beginning." The exhibition was a resounding success, raising funds not only for Frank, but for the Foundation's other programs. More importantly, it sparked a new sense of purpose in Frank and the other artists, who began volunteering their time to teach art classes at shelters and community centers. One of those classes took place at Charlotte's Diner, now transformed by her weekly free meal hour into a gathering place for people seeking connection and support. Charlotte, initially skeptical about hosting an art workshop, found herself moved by the sight of children and adults alike finding joy in creativity. Meanwhile, Edgar and Eleanor continued to thrive in their new home, their health and spirits improving with each passing day. Eleanor began writing poetry again, a passion she had abandoned during their years of struggle. Edgar, inspired by Frank's journey, started volunteering at the Foundation, helping others navigate the challenges of rebuilding their lives. Sophia often joined them, feeling more connected to her community and her father's legacy than ever before. Yet, she knew there were still untold stories waiting to be uncovered, lessons to be learned, and lives to be changed. One evening, as Sophia sat with Edgar and Eleanor in their living room, she shared a thought that had been on her mind for weeks. "I've been thinking," she said, "about creating something permanent. A community center maybe, a place where people can come for resources, classes, or just a safe space to be." Eleanor smiled, her eyes twinkling. "That sounds like a home," she said. Sophia nodded. "Exactly, a home for hope." As Sophia sets her sights on creating a lasting legacy through a community center, new challenges and opportunities emerge, testing her resilience and creativity. But just as she begins to lay the foundation for her next endeavor, an unexpected encounter threatens to shake everything she's built. How will Sophia navigate the complexities of this new chapter? And what truths will come to light along the way? Stay tuned for the next compelling installment of this transformative journey. The vision of a community center began to take shape in Sophia's mind, a place where stories like Edgar's, Eleanor's, and Frank's could find a home and multiply. She imagined classrooms filled with art supplies, kitchens providing hot meals, and quiet corners where weary souls could simply rest. It would be more than a building. It would be a symbol of second chances, much like the Caldwell Foundation itself. Yet, as plans for the center gained momentum, Sophia found herself facing challenges that tested her resolve. Construction costs ballooned beyond initial estimates. Permits became entangled in bureaucratic red tape, and skepticism from certain parts of the community threatened to undermine the project's progress. But Sophia refused to waver. One chilly morning, as she sipped her coffee in the foundation's office, a knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Marla, her assistant, stepped in, a small smile on her face. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "He says it's urgent." Sophia frowned, setting her mug down. Another surprise visitor? Let's see who it is. When she walked into the lobby, she found an elderly man with piercing blue eyes waiting. His clothes were neat but old-fashioned, and his posture, though slightly stooped, conveyed a quiet dignity. He removed his hat as she approached, holding it in his hands. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his voice rich and deliberate. "My name is Walter. I believe you've been speaking with Edgar and Eleanor." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. The man's presence exuded familiarity, though she couldn't place him. "Yes, I have," she said cautiously. "How do you know them?" Walter's lips curled into a faint smile. "I knew them long before you did," he said. "And I also knew your father." Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. "You knew my father? How?" Walter gestured toward a nearby chair. "May I sit? It's a story best told properly." Sophia nodded, her curiosity piqued. As they sat, Walter began to recount his tale. "I met Henry Caldwell many years ago," Walter said, his gaze fixed on the distance as though seeing a long-lost memory. "We were young men, full of ambition and ideas. We worked together briefly, he in finance, me in the legal field, but we bonded over a shared belief in the power of integrity. Henry often spoke of wanting to make a difference, not just in his career, but in people's lives." Sophia listened intently, her heart swelling with pride at this glimpse of her father's idealism. "But life has a way of testing our convictions," Walter continued. "Henry and I went our separate ways, each consumed by the demands of our professions. It wasn't until decades later that our paths crossed again, under very different circumstances." Sophia leaned forward, her breath catching. "What circumstances?" Walter sighed, his expression heavy. "It was Edgar and Eleanor. Henry found them in the midst of their struggles, and he reached out to me for help. Together, we worked to navigate the legal and financial mess they were in. It wasn't easy, but Henry was relentless. He believed in them, believed that they deserved another chance." Sophia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "He never told me any of this," she said softly. "Why?" Walter met her gaze. "Perhaps because he believed that true acts of kindness don't need recognition, or perhaps because he saw it as a way of atoning for his own regrets." "Regrets?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling. Walter nodded. "Henry confided in me about the strains on his marriage, the time he had lost with you and your mother because of his work. Helping Edgar and Eleanor was his way of ensuring that others didn't suffer, as he believed he had caused his family to." Sophia sat back, her mind reeling. The pieces of her father's life were coming together in ways she had never imagined. She had always known him as a principled man, but this deeper understanding of his sacrifices and regrets gave her newfound clarity. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked Walter. Walter smiled faintly. "Because Edgar and Eleanor matter to you, just as they mattered to Henry, and because I believe your vision for this community center aligns perfectly with the legacy your father wanted to leave behind." Sophia took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying. "Then I'll see it through," she said firmly. "For my father, for Edgar and Eleanor, and for everyone who needs hope." The following months were a blur of hard work and collaboration. Walter became a trusted advisor, using his legal expertise to cut through the red tape that had stalled the community center's progress. Edgar and Eleanor lent their voices to fundraising efforts, sharing their story at events and inspiring donors to contribute. Even Frank played a role, designing murals that would eventually adorn the walls of the center. Charlotte, too, became an unexpected ally. Though initially hesitant to embrace her role as a partner in kindness, her diner had transformed into a hub of community connection. She organized fundraisers, hosted volunteer meetings, and even offered her staff's time to help with the center's construction. On a crisp autumn morning, the center finally opened its doors. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was attended by hundreds, including many who had been touched by the foundation's work. The building itself was a testament to hope, its walls adorned with artwork from Frank and other local artists, its rooms filled with donated furniture and supplies, and its atmosphere alive with the promise of new beginnings. Sophia stood before the crowd, her voice steady as she spoke. This center is more than bricks and mortar. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together with open hearts and a shared purpose. My father believed that small acts of kindness could ripple outward and change the world. Today, we make that belief a reality. The applause was deafening, but it was the quiet, tearful gratitude in Edgar and Eleanor's eyes that meant the most to her. As the months turned into years, the center flourished, becoming a beacon of hope for the community. Sophia's journey, born from a simple sandwich request, had come full circle. And though the road had been challenging, it had also been transformative, not just for those she helped, but for herself. Through it all, Sophia carried her father's message close to her heart. It's never too late to make amends, to heal wounds, or to find redemption. And with every life touched by the center, she knew she was honoring that truth. If this story touched your heart, consider sharing it with others who need a reminder of the power of kindness. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting tales of compassion and connection. And in the comments below, share your own message of hope. I believe in the power of kindness to transform lives. Let's keep the ripple going.